I'd just like to start by thanking my YouTube and Patreon members for your support. There's been a lot of interest in the channel recently, which has been really encouraging to see, but it's really you guys who have kept me going this whole time, so I'd just like to say I sincerely appreciate your generosity.
How did you know you were going to fly a mission that day?
They notify you, or they send a guy around the night before, and that's all. A guy stick his head in the door, and he'd say, "Alberts." That was our pilot's last name was Alberts. They'd say, "Your crew, you're flying tomorrow." You get up in the dark, you'd go eat breakfast.
We got it, and they'd say breakfast at 2 o'clock. Or 3 o'clock, and we dress and go over, and then we eat, and then we go to briefing.
And that was the scary part.
Why was that?
Well, they had a big map up front, but it was covered with a curtain. And everybody would be in there, and they'd start pulling that curtain open, and everybody'd go, oh. Because as the lines where you were going kept getting longer and longer, everybody kept more and more worried. So if it was a little short mission, it wasn't so bad, but those big long ones like the Berlin and places like that were pretty rough.
What was it like in those rooms when you walked in?
Oh, very tense, everybody, and some were smoking, and we all synchronized our watches when we were told, and the gunners were briefed, and navigators were briefed, and the pilots, we went in and they opened this curtain and said, "This is it today, and we're going to fly this, and we'll be in with another group probably that will be with us in front of us," or something like that. And how many were going on this one, and another group would be going someplace else. And they would tell us the route. We wouldn't necessarily, we're going to go to Berlin. The route wouldn't go take us right there because we headed right for there. Most of the time they would know we would go up this way, then cut down this way, and maybe even come around and bomb them.
Was that to avoid fighters, flak?
Well, it's avoid, well, if we're going to go bomb Berlin, we'll be waiting for them, see.
Yeah, that first mission was a little bit strange because usually, as an aircraft commander, they usually send him out at least one mission with a seasoned crew. But no, they stuck me out on a mission right away with still wet behind the ears, so to speak, and away we go.
Do you even remember the first mission?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes, I do. And, that was our baptism to flak.
And they'd put us on a truck with our chutes and clothes and everything we needed and take us to our plane.
That's all.
And the plane would be out on the hard stand?
Yeah,
and
everybody had a regular hard stand they were on. Your plane was on.
Electrically heated suits. The Air Corps dresses for every occasion.
And incidentally, getting suited up was a half an hour procedure. It was 60 below zero up there. And you had to, it didn't have much, just no heating on the plane at all. So we had about 6 layers of clothing we had to put on. And by the time we got dressed, it took a half an hour. If they scrubbed the mission, we actually get upset after going through all that trouble.
You get into your flak suit. Mighty heavy material, but it wears well, the man says. Arch straps on his throat mic. Over this intercom system, he'll be able to talk to every man in the ship. And they can talk to him. They'll be talking for keeps today.
On April 11th, I was scheduled to go as a co-pilot with a man named Fioretti, who had 24 missions. He's almost finished. I get down to the airplane, get on board. He won't speak to me, nor will he let me touch anything. And his hands are shaking, and he's nervous, and transferred itself to me, I began to get nervous. I'm thinking, what am I doing here? He won't let me touch a thing. I can't even lock the tail wheel. He goes through I read him the checklist and he checks everything. But he won't speak to me.
To start with, the mission was not scrubbed, but it was put on hold. I believe that we got far enough along to start engines before the mission was not postponed, but put on hold. And we sat there for 2 or 2.5 hours, just lolling around on the grass and being our first mission. Why, your blood pressure heartbeat was elevated a wee bit.
Anyway, we reported to the aircraft, stood by waiting for the taxi signal. And that is the roughest part of a mission, in my money, is just sitting there waiting for the taxi flare to go off, because you have a lot of time to think about what's going to happen.
And then we got in our planes and got all the gear and everything, and everybody was ready, and then we would start engines, and then you would taxi out. And when they'd shoot the gun off, the first one would take off, and then the next one, and then the next one.
Everybody in the 8th Air Force had a hack watch. And at the briefing, everybody at the 8th Air Force goes through a setting where you have 10, 9, 8 down to 1 hack. Everybody's watch was set exactly at the same time in the whole 8th Air Force. And it had to be that way because the groups, we had a lot of groups. We put up 1,500 bombers every day, and about 36 in each group. And each group had to take off and get to a certain point on the English Channel 1 minute apart. So you had one group followed by another group, and it took over an hour for the 8th Air Force to cover any one point. I mean, it's a lot of airplanes. And you had to start your engines exactly at the right point, and you started taxiing at the right point, and your 9 planes going up to the runway, the first plane would taxi down on the runway, and as soon as he started taking off, the second plane would be there, and 30 seconds later, he was moving in the next one. In 4 minutes, we had the whole squadron of 9 planes flying.
We had a plane that we took from another crew. They'd finished, and we took that plane, and we had 4 engines, and the tower, when we'd take off, you go by the tower, and we would still be on the ground. Those engines would miss and jump and hop and everything, and I sat there at my radio table and just hung onto the table like this until we actually became airborne, because down at the end of the runway there was a lot of garbage down there that never made it, And then we'd complain to to our crew chief, that it missed. It'd get in the air and it'd fly like a kite. But when you went to take off and put the power to it, it would just miss. So anyway, they requisitioned 4 brand new engines and put them in the plane, and we were happy,
On takeoff, this was a new experience to us, having a full gas load and a full bomb load. And when we got onto the runway, when we were next takeoff, the pilot ran the throttles full tilt, and both of us stomped on the brake pedals. And the plane was shaking and rattling and rolling, and then he said, release. And then, there was a big thrust, but you needed it. You needed it to make sure that you got off, because that was very critical to take off on with that much weight. And that was a scary situation. You got used to it after a bit, but it still is always a moment of concern. And I was always saying some prayers as we rolled down that runway. And every time we took off, I just always wondered, am I coming back? I always had that thought, am I coming back?
Well, in the mornings it was, fog and ice. There were times we'd be lined up on the runway waiting to take off, and the ground crewmen had these garden hoses, a regular garden hose like you would use here, and they would, one would get on one end of the wing and the other on the other side, and they would flip these garden hoses to break the ice off the wings before we took off. And a lot of times, one time I remember we were up in the air for a good 20 minutes, and I looked out the window and it looked like we were still on the ground practically, and I said to the bombardier, what's our altitude? And he said 600 feet, and we had to be up about 20 minutes. And we had a heavy bomb load, but I guess the ice was slowing us down.
Now, we had all the bombs. They weren't. Remember, you've got to remember they weren't armed yet. Although, if they start exploding, it didn't have to be armed to explode. But we took off and we're hoping, we could make it. That's the main thing. And stay out of the prop wash of the one in front of us.
Can you explain what prop wash is?
Yeah, when the plane goes, it stirs up air, and you don't want to get in that turbulent air right after the plane in front of you, because a lot of planes get in that and they lose control of them. Like AT-6s or some of the little trainers, you get somebody's prop wash taken off or going, it could turn you over.
We had at prop wash. We had one collision. The one time I was leading our squadron, that they had two guys ran together, and both airplanes went down.
Prop wash is turbulence created by the props.
Yeah, it makes the airplane get uncontrollably unstable and it wallows around. Wings go down. It's pretty. It takes a few seconds to get out of it, but when you're in tight formation, you were too close that the condition made the two airplanes get together. Pretty bad. They're right in front of the tail gunner. He described it in detail.
As I recall, the weather was clear. I mean, some days when we took off, it was dangerous in England because so many planes were taking off, and those bases weren't all that far apart. And, unfortunately, a lot of collisions took place.
There were collisions. We had B-24 bases around there. B-20, they were just, I think, a little bit faster, but one came right in front of us, just like that. And he probably was mad at us, and we were scared about him because we didn't know he was coming, didn't know we were coming, and then we forgot about it because it happens. And there were collisions like that.
Yeah.
And then especially when you were taking off and it was kind of misty and you couldn't see anybody coming, all of a sudden.
I think probably the most frightening thing about it in the very beginning was that England was always under a cloud cover, and you'd take off, and then you would start, and you'd just grind and grind and grind and just keep going right up through the clouds. And sometimes that cloud cover was, I don't know how deep it was, but you're flying in there, and you're just hoping that everybody's flying the same, that you're keeping your space and ascending as best you can, And there was a lot of guys got lost because You know, they either climb too fast or too slow, or
There was like collisions.
yeah, yeah. And when that happened, that was all she wrote. You know, you never had a chance, but you would just come up through that, and if you've flown, you know what it looks like to go through a cloud cover, and you know you got 1,800 gallons of gas and a full bomb load, and that was really nerve-wracking. You just could hardly wait to get out and see that beautiful sunshine, because when you get up there, it's as clear as crystal, you know.
Just clouds all around us. You had no reference to the ground at all. We were on instruments, complete instruments. And when you're on instruments, you have to read the instruments, and then you're flying next to the plane and you feel like you're sliding into it, and you look at the instruments and you're not. So you get vertigo, like mad, nauseous. My co-pilot and I were passing the stick back and forth every 5 minutes. I mean, we were just getting very nauseous.
You know, it just gave me a funny feeling. You'd be flying along, pretty soon you couldn't see anything. And I often wondered, God, I wonder if there's another airplane right ahead of us or off to the side or anywhere.
If we get into formation, you'd climb up through the clouds, always clouds in England, and you'd climb up through the clouds and get on the top of them, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 feet, and there's this bright globe of orange up there, and you look over the back of the top of the clouds, it's like the back of a sheep as far as you can see. And it would take 15 minutes to get into formation, and the whole group would form very quickly, and you'd be on your route.
What do you remember about that mission? There must have been anticipation on your part, because this was the first mission into combat.
Yes. We were nervous. We were sweaty. At least the co-pilot and I had something to distract us flying the aircraft. Everybody else had to sit.
Is there, just for people that have never been on a B-17 crew, is there a lot of chatter over the radio? And
no, not when you're on a mission. It's pretty quiet.
Talk was very serious, because we got to remember we were up there and we were trying to save the lives of everybody on the ship, including ours.
We flew most of our missions well above 20,000 feet. We were unpressurized. The crew wore the bunny suits, which you could plug in to stay warm, but they're a bit dangerous because if you have electrical short, then you're out. You don't have enough warmth. Some people just dressed in heavy boots and fur jackets and what have you to try to keep warm, because it got as low as 40 below zero, even 50 below zero at a high altitude, because we're unpressurized. And for instance, the waist gunners had open windows there, and many of them froze their hands firing at the enemy aircraft with the windows open.
No, it was cold because we had heated suits.
And did they work pretty well?
Very well. You know, and it even had your feet. They weren't regular shoes.
They're like booties kind of thing?
Yeah, booties on your feet that were electric too. But when you took your regular shoes off, I just tied them fast to my waist. Everybody did. You just tie them onto your belt. So you always had your shoes with you in case something happened.
10,000 feet. Go on oxygen. Check in your station.
And the oxygen mask, you're tethered to the oxygen system, and you drool a little bit, and they freeze and get hard. And you have to be careful, because at that altitude, you can die within a matter of maybe 40 to 50 seconds if you lose your oxygen. So you've got a big problem along the way. If it's almost as bad as the enemy is just surviving in an unpressurized aircraft at high altitude. But it's amazing how our people could hold up. I have the greatest respect for the crew members, especially the ones in the back of the aircraft firing out those windows and freezing to death.
And our bombardier, Johnny Wilco, we were on a mission after we reached altitude. Bombardier crew, oxygen check. And you answered through the ship. Because Johnny had told us, boys, if I call and you don't answer, and I gotta come back and check on you, you damn sure better be dead, or you're gonna wish you were. So we never took it as a funny thing that Johnny would call and say, Bombardier crew oxygen check. Man, we answered on schedule. And all it was a means of checking on everybody, making sure they were okay. And maybe every crew didn't do it the same way. But I always felt like our boys knew what they were doing and could handle any situation that, that came about.
And we got into formation, climbed up to 21,000 feet. Got in my formation, and I'm way in the back. And I look out ahead of me, and the sun is just right. And it's glinting on the wings of airplanes as far as I can see. And in my mind, I thought to myself, my God, you'll never see this again. They'll never do this again. And I don't know why I thought that, but I do. And I thought to myself, this is historical. Only time, other than D-Day, I thought anything was historical. And it was. They've written hundreds of books about the Civil War, and they'll write hundreds of books about the 8th Air Force. And that impressed me. I never forgot that.
We've had people come in here and say, gosh, I remember I just lay there on the grass and the planes were flying over for an hour. Or some of the people that were over in France and Belgium and places like that, they'd just look up and say, my gosh, how many planes do they have? They were all flying over, and they thought, well, they're here to help us.